I'm with John Palmer, who is an international vice president of the Teamsters.
So we've had a very, very long history of corruption inside the Teamsters. And it was so bad or perverse that at one point the government forced the Teamsters, or the Teamster leadership agreed to a consent decree. This has been close to 30 years now that we've been under the terms and conditions of this decree. And they cleaned out a lot of the mob ties and all the corrupt activities. And then, in the process over this time, there's been a lot of folks that aren't mob figures that have, engaged in illegal activities and been tossed and removed and punished for their activities. Rome is he's the president of his local union, or secretary-treasurer, which is the principal officer in his local union, Local 853. He's the president of the Joint Council of Northern California area, and also an elected vice president out of the Western Conference. So, like a lot of folks in the Teamsters, he holds 3 positions, 3 salaries, and they all claim they do 3 jobs. I have serious questions about how anyone can perform 3 jobs. Most of us have a hard enough time performing 1. So Rome engaged in some, unlawful, illegal activities over the course of his service to the Teamsters, and got caught with his hands in the cookie jar. It wasn't theft, but it was illegal activity. It violated federal law, and he was charged, and it dragged on for 2.5 years, and finally came to fruition this week. He was removed from office and membership for 2 years.
And one of the issues that came up in the documents of the hearing is that he had actually been involved in urging an employer to put a relative on the payroll, but also trying to intimidate and prevent a member who worked for Gila Buslam even running for office, that had got involved in a local election to intimidate somebody. Did that happen?
Yeah, those 2 things, along with the third, which was involved setting up a sham scam third and fourth, a sham scam to create a contract with an employer that he was helping get the contract for a healthcare provider. There was some sort of insider trading that went on with that, and then also getting a Playboy Party Super Bowl tickets for Hoffa's executive assistant to attend the New Orleans Super Bowl a couple years ago, in exchange for negotiating a contract with a troubled local. He was the head of that division in the Teamsters Union, and went into a Minnesota local and actually negotiated a less than standard contract for those folks. And then in exchange for that favor, he got these tickets provided by the employer, and so was given to Hoffa's executive assistant. These things are illegal. You can't take anything of value, a coffee cup, a pen, or even a cap from an employee, let alone sort of make the members pay the price for your little escapade. So all those things are true, and most of it is documented with emails. There's a large email trail the government had. It's all public record.
The last election for his position in the Bay Area, that he had no opposition. Is this connected with the fact that Teamsters are afraid and are intimidated not to get involved and not to run for office?
Yeah, I think, absolutely. The problem that I've got with our locals and the international both is everything's become so political that folks have to fear for their job, not only from the employer, but the union if they get themselves in trouble. Our grievance panels are stocked with political favors and, folks that want you to toe the Hoffa line. The amount of money it takes to run for office, the average rank-and-file member just doesn't have that kind of money. Whereas if you have 3 jobs that are all well-paid, and I think Rome was in the mid to high 3s, which is an insult, too, to the average member. I doubt that any of our members even get a whiff of money like that. I doubt that most of them make 6 figures, let alone 360, 370, 380. So, yeah, there's a lot of obstacles, and they will come after you. There's no doubt about that.
Well, this is important because if we don't have a good democratic process and accountability from leaders, from local leaders all the way up to the top of international or national unions, we lose the strength that we have. For decades, we haven't really utilized the power of the membership. The membership is where the power really lies. And leaders over the last few decades have typically ignored the members. They haven't put the members first. I'm proud to say that I was a international organizer for the IBT in the Ron Kerry days, and putting the members first was not only a slogan, but it was the way we were doing things in the 90s. It was most evident in the success of the '97 UPS strike. That power has faded away because the leadership, not only in the Teamsters, but various unions around the country, have failed to realize where the real power is, and that's with the membership. They've decided that the corporate unionism model is the way that they want to go, and it really has defeated the purpose of unions, taken away the true power that we have.
And Aloice, who's International Vice President and is President of the Joint Council 7 and President of his local, is a very powerful figure in the Teamsters. He didn't have any people running against him in this last election. Is this an accident, or are there situations in which members feel that they can't run even for office?
Being new to the Bay Area, I'm not familiar with all the interactions of this joint council, but I can speak on what has happened in the Midwest, because that's where I come from originally with the Teamsters, and it was very evident there, and we had to fight back, that if you were a member and wanted to run in your local election, I know case after case to where members decided that they wanted to change the union for the better, and they were intimidated, beaten up, and often the leaders that were in threat of those other folks beginning to run would make deals with the employer to make sure that they weren't eligible to run by getting them fired or suspended, and any way to remove the dissidents from having a voice.
And one of the charges in this case is that members were organized against their democratic rights. They were prevented from having their democratic rights, and also that Aloice is charged took money and gifts, Playboy tickets to a Super Bowl game from an employer. Are you shocked by that?
I'm not shocked at all, because I saw it throughout the country in the 80s and the 90s. We fought back on it, and for a good while we had started eliminating some of that. We weren't able to successfully eliminate it all, but we certainly had changed the tone. Immediately after the '97 UPS strike, local leaders throughout the country had started calling us. I received many calls from locals that had not been supportive of Ron Carey and the agenda of moving things more into the hands of the members, and they'd called right after the '97 UPS strike and said, "Hey, we want to get on board with this. We like what we're seeing. We misjudged this guy." I think it speaks broadly about the fact that once individuals, including some of those leaders, understand the power is really in the members' hands, it changes things dramatically.
Now, the unions are under pretty frontal attack by the Trump administration, Department of Labor. They're putting in anti-labor people. What has been the response of the Teamsters and other unions to this kind of frontal attack on organized labor?
Sadly, most of the unions are really running scared, already talking about layoffs, fearful of what's going to happen, rather than turning to the membership and understanding if we take care of the members and be honest with them and mobilize them, that's how we can really turn this thing around. You got to keep in mind that there are many unions throughout the country that have been in a right-to-work situation for decades and decades, and they're still very large and they're powerful, but it's the culture that they put out there that makes the difference. So there are examples to where right-to-work situations, you still have very strong local bodies that are doing tremendous things because they're involving the members directly.
And the kind of corporatization of the unions, the business unionism that kind of dominates a lot of unions in this country, you think that that's part of the problem of the labor movement?
Absolutely. If you look at the change over the last several decades, more and more we have folks coming in to take top positions as consultants and being hired into positions that don't have a rank and file background. They don't understand what it really is to be a rank and file member. They have a tough time relating, and they go back to their college days and they look at what they learned as far as the corporate model and shifting many of the things that as far as our functions and the way that we operate into a corporate model rather than a rank and file based machine that can really turn things around.
Okay, and what do you think would be happen if he's removed from office? You think there'll be any changes?
Well, there was just recently an election to where the reform movement within the Teamsters across the country made a very impactful statement by electing new leadership in the central states and the Southern Conference of the Teamsters, and that feeling has opened up some eyes. So it's an opportunity for those folks that really want to be proud, and many of us will always be Teamsters at heart. If they really believe in that, they will start getting together and talking amongst themselves and saying, what do we do here? It's been shown that things aren't right. There's been illegal activities, and they need to come together and decide what do they really want. It's their future, their grandchildren's future, and the future of their grandchildren's children. So it's very important.
My name is David Reardon. I'm a Teamster IBT retiree from Local 85 in San Francisco. And in 1991, I was elected a delegate to the convention from Local 85 as a supporter for the Ron Carey slate. Carberry, the principal of the IRB, was asking Aloice questions, and Aloice kept not recalling things, particularly around some conversations and dinners with the corporate head of Southern Wines and Spirits was going on during the negotiations. And then every time that Aloice couldn't recall, then Carberry would get up, go through his papers, or give Aloice the email. So Carberry had Aloice's emails and IBT expense account. He said, did you have dinner with this guy from Southern Wines and Spirits? I don't recall. At this hotel? I don't recall. So then Carberry pulled up the IBT expense accounts, was right there, having dinner with the guy. Terrible. And at one point, he said, accused Aloice of having the employer write some kind of letter for the union. And Carberry said, is this an unusual event? Where is writing a letter to the union, for the union? And Aloice, oh, well, I don't know. He's a very mealy-mouthed guy, you know, because usually he's at the top of the power pyramid, telling all these people in the room what to do and having them kiss a ring. But now here he's sitting in the seat. And Carberry, this disheveled old dude, is like questioning him. And they just got started. Carberry is starting to dig in, I think. I just couldn't stand being in there. And I couldn't hear. There was no microphones. How do you have a hearing without microphones? Everybody's mumbling. Yeah. Half an hour it was. I found it pretty stifling. A couple of other women who were rank and file Teamsters in there. I mean, probably everyone was working, right? It was just this clique, this Teamster bureaucracy clique around Aloice.
What was your experience with Aloice, and do you believe these charges that have been made against him?
Well, that's a good question. I have very little personal experience with Aloice, although I know he's related to Chuck Mack. And when I was an active Teamster, I clashed with Mack and different officials for different reasons. But I read the charges, at least about 6 months ago. Someone gave me a list of the charges, and I thought they were very credible and specific.
And the top-down kind of corporatization of the unions, do you see that in the Teamsters, and you see that as a problem in the labor movement?
That is the main problem in the labor movement. The top-down bureaucracy, which is almost always tied to the Democratic Party, stifles any kind of rank-and-file initiative or imagination, and has led to some serious problems. I would argue it's led to the Trump administration, and it's led to global warming, because these Teamsters love to haul pipe around for their short-term gain. It's very narrow-minded. And the whole time I was in the Teamsters, there was no political education in terms of the working class, how we fit into the capitalist system. These people are just bureaucrats. They get their own benefits from being a bureaucrat, and Aloice is their guy right now. He's the top bureaucrat, and they're all in his clique. That's what it looked like to me, and I was glad to see him up there being questioned.
And, I mean, the appointment, he appoints all these people, I mean, the kind of corporate structure of a union, does that lead to intimidation of members, that they're afraid to participate because they're afraid of retaliation?
Of course. When myself and Art Persico were campaigning for delegates to the 1991 Teamster Convention, people screamed at us, yelled at us, and knocked stuff out of our hand. Then we went to the convention. We came back with a report. We were the first delegates ever to bring money back from our expense account. We didn't spend it all. We brought back, and we brought back a list. People chastised us, screamed at us. Someone came up, knocked everything out of our hands. Other people threw our report in the garbage can. It was terribly intimidating. Not only intimidating, because I'm not that easily intimidated, but it was alienating, like in this room today. I don't want to be part of this. You know what I mean? You might not be intimidating me physically where I'm scared, but I don't want to be around you in your group. Just like in this room today, they're like a bunch of thugs. White, almost 90%.
And as far as representation, I mean, Trump is launched a kind of a frontal attack on labor, yet it seems like the unions haven't called any mass mobilization. There's no labor protests. There's no labor education campaign about right to work for less and other attacks on labor. Is that indicative of the political paralysis of the unions and the structure?
It is indicative of that and the Democratic Party and of capitalism, because wages for working people have been stagnant since the late 70s. And Trump's frontal attack is just part of a continuum of attacks against labor. And the union bureaucracy, maybe with the exception of SEIU, is complicit in that.
And you were not thrown out, but there was an effort at the hearing today to remove people. What do you think about that?
Well, it's kind of a form of an intimidation and of non-transparency, like yourself. They didn't want you recording. They didn't want the public to know. They don't want the rank and file to know. So it furthers their power by keeping everything secret. And the way they all looked around like they're in this gang or club looking for someone who doesn't belong in here, you know? It's the antithesis of what a successful trade union movement would be. A successful trade union movement has to be inclusive and transparent, which that is not.